Well, y'all, it's so nice to be here on Twitch and hopefully meeting some new folks. And welcome to Left Reckoning. These are going to typically be behind our paywall for our patrons only, but figured it was June. Why not have a little bit of fun and introduce some of the folks to what we're doing here. And no one better to do it with than our friend Ben Burgis. We got a lot on the docket, so might as well start going through
Yeah,
some
let's
of the
do.
sound and stuff. I was thinking, maybe let's start it up because the headline, at least the photograph that we're using for the thumbnail tonight, is a picture of Willie Nelson and Bernie Sanders. And there's been a little bit of talk about this. Really, like it all spurs off from something our friend Bronco Marchich put out in Jackman, a piece on Bernie Sanders. And I will say this, Ben,
Mm,
just before we get into this, because Ben and I are going to have a little friendly debate on this. But
yeah.
Bronco is such a damn good writer that I had an initial reaction against it, and then I read the Bronco piece, and I like started to lean a little bit towards like let's fucking go another round of Bernie 2024. But anyways, all that aside, Ben, potentially Bernie Sanders might run. He hasn't ruled it out. There's not really been any
Yeah.
signaling that he's going to do it, but it's a
Mhm.
potential. Could you maybe lay out, the positive case for another Bernie 24 run?
Sure. I mean, to my mind, the biggest positive case is that I, I don't want. I don't particularly want Joe Biden to continue to be the president, and I would even less like it if Donald Trump were the president again, which,
Mm-hmm.
as of this moment, looks like a really strong possibility, right? In 2024, if we're going to be real about it, given like the polls and you know everything. I don't need to recite to you about how the last couple of years have been. And I think that Bernie. I mean, honestly, I think that even I don't think that there's a centrist alternative to Biden that like even electorally would make sense, right? And of course,
Mm-hmm.
even if they did, I would like them because they would be a centrist, right? I mean, I would, I would like Bernie Sanders, because he's a good, honorable social democrat who supports kinds of things in the short term that I do. Even if I would dream bigger long term dreams than that. So uh, then, like to my mind, the real question is like, okay, so if there is going to be a left candidate in 2024, which and yeah, I mean Nathan, is not off here. I think he's most likely to do it if Biden doesn't opt to run again. But
Mm-hmm.
if there is a left candidate, which in which case, by the way, but we should just take a beat to think about what that might mean, right? It mean like this, that'd be like, Kamala Harris, get in. 10%
Yeah,
of the
that's
vote in
not
Ohio
good.
or
Yeah.
whatever, right? Like I think that could get like really grim, right? Like, because at least Joe Biden, as awful as he is politically, at least he sort of comes off like he's made out of human parts in ways that a lot of other centrist politicians don't. But yeah, I think that if there is going to be a left candidate in 2024, I think it's kind of got to be him. The only alternative I would see at all that would make any sense to me would be like maybe if Fetterman pulls it out against Dr. Oz, he could become like a real contender, which right now looks unlikely. But if that happens, then maybe. But otherwise, I don't see anybody else who has a national profile, who has what Bernie has going for it, right? Which is that he's actually like the kind, even though Bernie is like robustly socially progressive and and has good issue positions on everything, he
Mm-hmm.
also has a fair amount of like crossover appeal outside of Team Blue in the culture war, right? There are lots of people who like Bernie,
Totally.
who might otherwise end up voting for Trump, even, right? I mean, like, and certainly might just not vote. Whereas I think that, you know, by and large, the rest of the Berniecrats, don't really have that kind of crossover appeal. So I just don't see who else it would be. And so the question to my mind is, do you sit out
Mm-hmm.
2024, or, you know, do you do Bernie again? And like, I mean, he's very old. That's not wrong. right? I mean, that's like a real objection.
Hmm.
But also, though, uh,
I mean, did you see that fastball he threw at the minor league game? I mean, you're in the UK; they blocked that stuff there, but
yeah, no. I mean, I mean, that's also the thing, though, right? I mean, like physically and mentally, I mean, like he's probably in better shape than either the current president or Trump, right? So, I mean, I think that's I think that negates that to some extent. I mean, like I do want to acknowledge, by the way. I mean, I know we're being like a little bit playful with this, but I do want to acknowledge like the big thing that you can say here, which is just like it's really bad that there isn't a bench. There needs to be a bench,
totally,
but like right now, it kind of seems like there isn't one.
Yeah. Can I just add a little bit of
yeah.
historical context, a little bit of based Bernie from years past? There was this that people threw back at him as if he was not Democrat enough. But in 2011, Bernie Sanders talks up primary challenge to Obama as a good idea for democracy and for the Democratic Party. The Vermont Independent is not running for president, but he says it's time that people start asking the president some hard questions about why he said one thing during his previous campaign and is doing another thing today on Social Security or Medicaid. And of course, that got brought up
One
again.
wrong.
Yeah, exactly. That got brought up again, and not to say like, look at how right he was about those things, but to say, look at this guy's questionable loyalty.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, let me just lay out my position on this, and I mean, I hope people know we're tongue in cheek that Ben and I are going to be at each other's necks here, but I've been on record saying that um, I would support a Bernie 24 run, if anything, to just like block like a Ro Khanna
Uh,
or any of the other people who want to inherit what Bernie's built. So that's the one thing that like gets me very nervous, right? Is that
yeah.
all of this kind of mobilization that we've had, and like I think like out of the Bernie, like so think about the people who get excited by Bernie as like one general population. I think there's probably about 10% of them now who are like actively involved in some way or another with what we would consider to be like democratic socialist politics.
Yeah.
I think that other 90% is like willing to go with us, but we have a lot of internal recruitment to do to actually be able to build the national force to build some kind of real serious left labor party, or left labor slate, whatever you want to build.
Yeah.
um, so I'm very much like, let's block any kind of false successors for that. So on that level, I'm there. What gets me worried about it, my anxiety about it, is
Uh,
twofold. It's that, and look, I'm just gonna be honest with folks, just so no one calls me a hypocrite. Happens again, 24. I'm dusting off the shirt and I'm calling everyone in my family and knocking on doors,
sure.
until it's over, 100%. But I worry what another loss like that might
Uh,
do to demoralize the movement. So, like for me, it would have to start to look very clear. And I know that you've been laying out stipulations that like if Biden doesn't run or something like that would be an important caveat to make.
sure.
Um, Two, I also get nervous about just how much, and I thought that, for example, in 2020, some people within the DSA are making this argument about not doing Bernie, like same thing that they did in 2016, and going all out for Bernie again because it takes up a lot of resources, and thinking that a lot of that was wrong because Bernie's been so good for recruitment and growth of the organization. Um, but if the race feels like it's super vintage and we're just sort of doing the same fun thing again so we can meet some of our friends in Iowa who we haven't seen in 4
Uh,
years, I don't know if that would be the best sense
yeah. I mean,
of
that'd
set of
certainly
a.
be a bad reason to do it.
And I also would say that one thing that has always made me worried about so many people coming into politics through Bernie 2016, through Bernie 2020, is
Yeah.
that there is like a significant part of our base that still really does view politics, not just on the national level, but actually extremely narrowly on like the presidential level. Um, where like you saw that from people who like after Bernie loses, like who are we going to get for our third party candidate that we're all going to throw our votes behind? And like, I don't mind voting third party. Ben and I think have both been honest about this. I'll just speak for myself. I happily didn't vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016. I don't like get worked up about that kind of stuff. I'm not that guy at
Sure.
all. But I also like, it was like a pure like personal pleasure kind of thing, just like two middle fingers as Slavoj Žižek did to you, to like the establishment again, right? And like that kind of misunderstanding of politics there, right? Do you get what I'm sorry, I'm rambling a
No,
little bit,
no,
but like,
I think I got you. And look, I'll do the same. You know, full disclosure, I did not vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Um, I did vote for for Joe Biden in 2020 because I was in a swing state and whatever. But they have and and I I have
mhm,
and by the way, I mean, like, I think something we agree on there, it's a little bit of a side note, is that I think people get too worked up about that, one way or the other. Like, I think it's I think that's like a tactical question, not a deep question,
mhm,
right? So it's like, I think
mhm,
um I actually do think that it's good that the 2020 election turned out the way, the way, given that it was going to be either Biden or Trump. I actually think it's good that it ended up being Biden. And you know, especially because if you've been like following closely, as I know you guys have, the wave of Starbucks unionizations, like if you look at
mhm.
the rulings, right, that the NLRB has made, right, like those would not have been the same rulings, right? Like that actually does matter to me quite a lot, But
Yeah, and I think like there's a posture that says like that stuff shouldn't matter, and it's like, look, Biden sucks, and like, but this idea that you need to make a complete equivalency between whichever is the
yeah,
Democrat, whichever is the Republican, and you can't even discuss that. I guess in theory, if you think like that's going to lead to a better Democratic Party, I don't think that's
sure,
what most of those people are arguing. I don't think
Mhm.
like it really, to me, it just serves like demoralized voting, and like I get reason why you wouldn't want to like, but like you said, like being precious about like who you give your vote to, and
yeah,
this theory that like you're the one empowering the imperialism when you vote for a
yeah.
lesser of evil candidate, I think is like it's like misanthropic almost.
No,
Mhm.
I think so, right? I mean, I think that, and look, I get David's point, right? Like that about overemphasizing electoral politics, especially presidential politics. And I think a lot of that is a symptom of powerlessness, right? You don't really you don't really control anything bigger.
Mhm.
So like your own little, yeah, that's when you get precious about it, right? This is my vote, right? How am I gonna spend it? I think I think that's I think that's misguided. And I also, by the way, I mean, I voted for for Biden, and I did give, I did get, say, look, anybody who's in a swing state who wants my, who wants my advice, that's it. But also, like, I never had any interest in denouncing people who weren't going to,
Mhm.
and that always seemed like a terrible use of my time. Uh,
Definitely.
but um, but yeah, I mean, bringing it back to Bernie, yeah, I mean, I get the worry about demoralization. This is, I would point out, just for fun though, on that point, who ran for president 4 times before finally winning time number four.
Our political idol, Ronald Reagan.
Reagan actually only ran twice, but
Oh shit.
as far as I know, right, there's 76 when he ran. He challenged Ford in the primaries, but then
Mhm.
uh, the way I asked is a little bit trick question. I don't mean president of America. I'm talking about one Lula Inacio da Silva.
Okay.
Uh,
Actually, our idol, not ironically.
yeah, our
Um,
actual non-ironic idol when he won. That was 2002. That was that was run number four, right? So I think there is some precedent to this. Now you want to say it'd be a
Bernie,
long
Bernie, Bernie. Go ahead. Go ahead.
you want to say it'd be a longer shot. Fair enough. I mean, it would be, right? Like, I think that I think that, like, I think Lula, was running at the head of a movement with much deeper roots, socially, than Bernie would be, and so, I think it is a much longer shot. But I also think, again, if we're just interested in, like, what are the alternatives here, right? Like, because I also saw, like, people in the chat bringing up, some criticisms of Bernie that I agree with, like about some bad votes and stuff like that, and like
Mhm.
all of that's true, right? No doubt about it. I'll just go ahead and plug something I wrote for Current Affairs like a couple weeks ago, um, where basically said, like, look, I don't, I don't agree with, with some of the, some of the Ukraine, votes of like, Bernie in the squad. I don't think they should
Hmm.
have done that. I think that like whatever kind of case you could make for that, at the very least, should have been tied with, peace negotiations. But I also think that, politics is always about comparative choices, and say, okay, like there's this kind of line that some people run these days that's like, oh, see who the real anti-imperialists are, like Josh Hawley and like people like that. And it's like, no, really not, right? I mean, like I think there are lots of grounds to criticize, right, the Social Democrats in Congress for not being anti-imperialist enough, but like all of those people are way worse. And similarly with the presidential election, it's like, yeah, Bernie has some votes I disagree with, but like, uh, who is it that you think could run for president, like, and have a real shot? Who doesn't?
Hmm. Well, I mean, this is somebody asked us in the chat this too. Like, if Bernie doesn't run, who do you three want to see next? And before I say anything on that,
Yeah,
I just want to note that, like, you know, um, the difference between Bernie and Lula is just like the actual structure of the movement
yeah,
that Lula had, and not just like how deep the base was, but it was also the involvement. And I think one of the things that, like, look, I'm a huge Bernie fan. You're not going to hear me badmouth him much. But one of the things I think has been sort of frustrating for me post 2016, I really wish he would embrace more of like the growing socialist movement and be more involved, because that, more than I think, we're talking about the potential of like, oh, maybe in 2024 we could maybe get like 20% of the Bernie people to like join up with us.
uh,
Bernie Sanders comes out and says, I'm a member of like DSA, et cetera, and starts directing people to join that, I
uh,
think would be very, very helpful versus like our revolution, which is, not that different from a lot of kind of pressure groups set up by politicians. All that being said, um, at least from my perspective, and I hope this doesn't come off as a non-answer, it's like it is Bernie for me, or nobody else. In the same way that, like, who do I want to run for the governor of Texas,
mhm.
right? It's like, I don't know, me, like, I mean, like, I mean, frankly, it's just like, I don't know. I'm just kidding around about that, but like, there's nobody who represents like our kind of politics on the state
Sure.
level scale here. So on any level of elections, you're picking between extreme right wingers and like horrific corporate Democrats, which is like a bad political point to be in. And I think that you can make a mistake by over fixating on that. I'm just talking, internally here in Texas for a second. Like, you can fixate on that too much instead of saying like, okay, well, what we need to do is we need to build up our movement, our capacity for our opinion on this to even really matter. Now, as like a pundit thing, like, I would go for a Bush over an AOC, a Cory Bush over an AOC in the near
Yeah,
future if I had to pick out of the bench. I
sure.
like Ilhan. I'd also like to just eradicate all of the arguments about natural born citizen. I always
Sure.
hated that. Um, what Ben said earlier, like the Fetterman thing. I mean, Fetterman is probably the most ideologically distant, but just for like seeing Fetterman have like going and meeting with the EU delegation, like looking like he does, I think would be good for
In basketball
America.
shorts.
Yeah, I think that would be awesome. So I'd support it just for that.
Yeah, I do want to just say one thing about Fetterman. I think I'm actually going to be writing something about for Jacobin.
Good.
That what I like about Fetterman isn't particularly like policy details. On policy details, he's like an okay Bernie-crat, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he's not even an amazing Bernie-crat, but they have a. But what I like about him is that as a political communicator, I feel like he's like the only one of the Bernie-crats who actually sort of like seems to be trying to somewhat do the Bernie playbook, right? Is like I think that like, okay, so like there's a video that you can see on Fetterman's website, where he's talking about like LGBT rights, and he, I guess I really liked the fact that I just didn't see any trace of sort of academic or sort of
Yeah.
HR department language there. Like it was just like how you would explain to a normal person in a bar or something why you support equal rights for everybody.